300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a jam-packed Monday morning. A lot to discuss from this wild NFL Divisional Round in the postseason. Literally, it was an all-around win for the NFL. All 4 divisional round games were nail-biters. They all came down to a final score, which, by the way, I'll touch on in my Malkin's moments, but it was the first time ever in the NFL postseason that has happened. Literally just every single game, 3 walk-off field goals, 1 walk-off touchdown in overtime. It was a spectacular weekend, and it was capped off by the game that I didn't necessarily plan on starting with, given how the Rams and Bucs game shaked out, but I ultimately wanted to start with the Chiefs and the Bills today. Wow, what a game. 42-36 in overtime. The Chiefs just managed to out-duel Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And let me first say this. This was one of the just greatest NFL football games from start to finish that I've seen it in a long time. You think about not just the entertainment value, but the quality of football from the start of the game to the end of the game. There really aren't enough superlatives to not only describe the quality of play from both sides, but especially the 2 quarterbacks. You want an NFL playoff game that embodies mano-a-mano, 2 guys that are gutting it out, going up against one another, just trying to outshine one another each step of the way. You couldn't have gone a better treat in the NFL. You seriously couldn't have gone a better treat. And again, I don't think there are enough just superlatives to describe and contextualize what we saw yesterday as far as just the quality of play, because it wasn't just what they were doing, Josh Allen and Mahomes, in the air. They also complemented it by leading their teams in rushing yards, which is something that you hardly ever see. And so for me, when you think about football games, we saw with the Cowboys, it was marred by all these penalties. Well, the Chiefs and the Bills, it was nearly a flawless offensive football game. There's only 4 penalties combined from both sides. And then you get to the final 6 minutes. And then more importantly, the final 2 minutes, 25 combined points in the final 2 minutes of the game. 3 lead changes, 1 tie, 3 passing touchdowns, over 221 combined yards between Mahomes and Allen in the final 2 minutes. Sometimes those are the stat lines for quarterbacks over the course of an entire game, in the entire quarter, let alone in a 2-minute spurt. And the way that these 2 quarterbacks have been playing, not only in this game, but all season, you just had the feeling that whichever quarterback was going to get the football last was going to win. And that was just the feeling that you had throughout the entire night, watching these 2 teams just carve up one another's defenses. And this had nothing to do with a poor defensive performance by either side. This was just quarterback heroics and quarterback greatness being put on display. And let me say this, the fact that it seemed like the Buffalo Bills had this game completely wrapped up with 13 seconds left, and Mahomes manages to engineer a game tying field goal to Butker from 49 yards out. He hits Tyreek for 19, hits Travis Kelce for 25, all in a matter of 13 seconds to tie this thing up. I'll touch on the stellar performance of Mahomes, but this is the interesting thing, because I've always known that Mahomes was special. But I'll be the first to admit that I was not always a huge and firm believer in Josh Allen. And the performance I saw from him yesterday, he earned my respect yesterday. Josh Allen, he convinced me yesterday. I will never again question the talent or the abilities of Josh Allen ever again. I won't do it. I want to pay that man his respects because he was absolutely spectacular yesterday. And the thing is, we've seen some great performances from Josh Allen before, not only last year, but even this season, even against the New England Patriots in the wild card game. I still sometimes had my reservations, but it wasn't just a talent ability. It was the leadership skills, the clutchness skills, where he put that on full display, and I was starstruck and just mesmerized by the performance and by the drives that he kept engineering time and time again, not only with under 6 minutes to go, when he was able to pick up 2 fourth downs to score. First of all, fourth down in which he had to run with his legs. He was having to backpedal because Melvin Ingram climbed over, essentially got through to the back to the backfield, and he had to loop around and pick up a first down with his legs. And then he throws across his body on a 4th and 13 to the end zone to Gabriel Davis, who had a fantastic NFL record, historic postseason game. And he'll be on my Malkin's moments as well, to give them not only 29 to 26 point leads, but then 36 to 33 leads. Josh Allen was just fantastic. And then obviously that laser beam to Gabriel Davis with 13 seconds left, he was fantastic. So I am never going to question Josh Allen anymore. And I'm not saying that he is better than Patrick Mahomes, because I don't think he is. But I see those two guys having just as much talent. Sometimes intangibles are differences, and Mahomes' resume certainly is much more established than Josh Allen's. Josh Allen can't measure up to Mahomes' resume right now, but when you talk about just innate skill set, it's hard to argue after last night's performances that you can't talk about those two guys in the same sentence, because he was absolutely sensational. I mean, again, once Mahomes finds Tyreek Hill for like the 60-yard touchdown bomb with a minute seconds left, you think, well, we haven't seen Josh Allen in this position too much. He goes 6 plays, 49 seconds, the entire length of the field, finds Davis for a touchdown, just perfect play calls, perfect executions. He was sensational. He was sensational. Obviously, the 75-yard touchdown pass to Gabriel Davis, that's where you saw the arm talent, the arm explosiveness. It's just rare. It's just rare. And I just, again, 27 of 37, 329 yards, four touchdowns, a 90.3 QBR in a playoff game. Mahomes had a better QBR than that. But again, so I wanted to just give my flowers to Josh Allen, because for him to be getting beaten up out there time and time again, being asked to do so much and to deliver, and against 99.9% of quarterbacks and teams, in that moment, you're advancing to the AFC Championship game. And maybe there's only a handful of guys, Aaron Rodgers, maybe, Brady, and Mahomes, on his best day, perhaps Russell Wilson, that can maybe get you into field goal range with 13 seconds left in that situation. You just don't see it too often. And that's where I transition to Patrick Mahomes, and just got to say, time and time again, this man just continues to amaze me. And I do think that we're watching the most talented quarterback to have ever played the game right now. And I understand it's controversial. No one's saying that he is going to have a more illustrious career than Tom Brady. That's not what we're saying. Tom Brady's the GOAT. But I do think that Aaron Rodgers is sensational in his arm talent and his ability. But I don't think there's anything Aaron Rodgers can't do, or that Aaron Rodgers can do, that Patrick Mahomes can't. This is the fourth straight trip to the AFC Championship game. There are a lot of media pundits out there that are trying to make the claim, well, Mahomes has to back it up. He hasn't been sustaining the success long enough. Some quarterbacks don't reach multiple AFC Championship games. Just ask Phillip Rivers. Ben Roethlisberger has won 2 Super Bowls, but if Mahomes is able to win a second one this year, it's a different conversation entirely. He's already making a strong case to be in Canton after this year. So he was sensational. And then I just love Andy Reid's quote about Patrick Mahomes, what he said to him right before that 13-second drive. He said, when it's grim, be the Grim Reaper. And that's just such a great quote from a head coach trying to add a little levity to a moment that was gigantic in that spotlight. And Mahomes, we've lamented the fact that sometimes he hasn't always been as efficient at times in the postseason, although I would argue that he's always fantastic. It's really that one Super Bowl that we say, well, maybe he wasn't quite at his best, which is understandable why. He had 5 different offensive tackles, offensive line. And yesterday he played one of his best postseason games we've ever seen in his career. 33 of 44, 378 yards, 3 touchdowns, 96 QBR, 7 rushes for 69 yards and a rushing touchdown. He did everything. And most importantly, he's playing so much more intelligently. That's the other piece of it for Mahomes that people and fans would sometimes kind of writhe over and anguish is they would look at some of the careless passes or the attempts that just seem too bold in big spots, taking too many chances. He'll still go for it, but he's a lot more willing to just take what the defense is giving him, which shows the maturity, which shows the growth, which shows the development. And at the end of the day, he trusted his go-to receiver, or his go-to in this instance, tight end, one of the best 1-2 duos in the NFL and on the Chiefs. Hits Kelsey to set up Butker for the game-tying field goal, and then he hits Kelsey for the overtime touchdown. And unfortunately, this shines a bigger spotlight on the overtime rule, which is just cruel. It's truly cruel. And the fact that we're deprived of getting a chance to see both of these quarterbacks continue to battle, continue to get extra possessions in overtime is wrong. And I'm sure at some point the NFL will probably alter it. And the fact that this game was relegated to a coin flip, unfortunately, we've seen Mahomes on the other end of it. We've seen other quarterbacks on the other end of it. Because, again, even though I was a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs in this ball game, I'd be the first to admit that I would have loved to have seen what Josh Allen can do in this overtime period. Just like if the Bills had won the coin toss, I would have been lamenting if Mahomes and the Chiefs didn't get an opportunity to match. Because that's what the game of football wanted. That's what NFL fans wanted outside of maybe Kansas City or maybe Buffalo if it was the Bills that won the coin flip. So it's a difficult way for the game to end in that fashion. But overall, an extremely memorable game from both sides. And just a true delight, a true treat to put a bow tie on what was a spectacular slate of NFL Divisional Round games across the board. Just unbelievable. And that's what allows me to transition into another extremely memorable game, and a game that, to be honest, I thought I was going to start the show with today. Normally, when I'm thinking about talking about different games and topics for the shows, you normally etch in the ones that you assume that you're going to start off the show with. And I thought that the Rams and the Buccaneers was going to be the game I would talk about first. And then here came the Chiefs and the Bills, said, 1 second, hold my beer. We've got another thing for you. But this Rams and the Bucs game, the Rams knocked off the defending Super Bowl champ Buccaneers 30-27 in the first game of a doubleheader on the NFL Sunday slate, the divisional round games. And let me first just say that this was the most elating, infuriating, disappointing, and yet enthralling NFL game that I've seen in several years. The emotional oscillations and fluctuations. I don't think I've ever developed a headache, improved from a headache, and then redeveloped a headache once again in an NFL game in quite some time. Because this might have been the best and the worst game that the Rams have played all tied up in one. Because the Rams did everything they could to win the game, and they also did everything they could to lose the game and gift it to Tom Brady. The start that the Rams had, you couldn't have asked for a better start. On the road, Matthew Stafford's first divisional round playoff game of his career. He comes out firing. He's carving out the defense. The first drive is extremely promising. They get held up in the red zone. They have to settle for a field goal, but ultimately he's hitting OBJ, another big target, playing in his first divisional round playoff game of his career, who was sensational. 6 catches, 69 yards. Cooper Kupp. Stafford hits him on a bomb, like a 60-plus yard, I think it might have been 70-yard pass receiving touchdown to Cooper Kupp. The defense was electric, which I'll touch on. They jump out to a 20-3 lead, and everything is going the Rams' way. And it wasn't necessarily for a poor play from the Bucs. It wasn't just one singular poor play. It was the fact that the Rams were just imposing their will on the Bucs on the road. And yet, it's 20-3. Tom Brady throws a pick at his own 30-yard line, and the Rams are about to deliver the knockout blow, the knockout punch, and the first domino fell. Cam Akers fumbled the ball. And I tweeted, put a pin on this. This might be the first potential play that the Bucs may seize back momentum in this game from that play right there. That's what I thought might have been the first domino to fall. And it was, because it ended up being a lasting theme in the game, was the inability of the Rams to continue to hold on to the football. Again, they did everything they could in the first half prior to that fumble to blow the doors off of the Bucs and to deliver the knockout punch. And then that one fumble gave them a glimmer of life, gave them a glimmer of hope going into the second half. And I said, okay, put a pin on that play. And then in the second half, first 2 possessions for both sides are stalled. Rams score a touchdown. It's 27-3. And they're playing extremely well. But here's the problem. Defense holds Brady to a field goal, fine, 27-6. The one cardinal sin, if you are a road team, whether it's the playoffs, whether it's the regular season, the one cardinal sin is when you commit turnovers as the road team. The fact that the Rams managed to overcome 4 fumbles and still win the football game is miraculous in and of itself. At one point I was tweeting, it's going to be a miracle if the Rams can actually win this game. Most people thought it'd be a miracle if the Bucs could come back. I was saying it was going to be a miracle for the Rams to somehow triumph and overcome all of these turnovers, and yet somehow they managed to do it. because Cooper Kupp, who is the most reliable, most trustworthy pair of hands on the Rams, fumbled it at 27-6. And I'm not trying to bash Cooper Kupp here, because when you look at his career, he's been sensational. He's been sensational all year, not only in the game, but this entire season. Fumbles happen. I understand that. But just for some context, it was just the 5th fumble of Cooper Kupp's career. He fumbled it once in 2017, fumbled it 3 times in 2019. So it had been nearly 2 full seasons since he had even fumbled a ball at all. So no need to bash Cooper Kupp here, but that's just the reality of the facts. That play happened, directly results into a touchdown for Brady and the Bucs, and they make it 13-27. And then you have the frenetic sequence in which the Rams, immediately following that touchdown, 3 and out, the crowd is beginning to grow and roar, and it's starting, and the atmosphere and the noise starting to cascade down onto the field. And then Von Miller has the strip sack of Brady, and he's still trying to celebrate on the sidelines. And 20 seconds later, there's the center snaps it before Matthew Stafford's ready, and they give it right back to the Bucs at midfield. And there you go. Now all the momentum is seized right back. Rams miss a field goal. Brady airs one out 55 yards to Mike Evans, and it's a 27-20 ball game. And there's 3:30 to go. Bucs have no timeouts. Akers fumbles it again 55 seconds later. And Brady is able, with a short field, to tie the game up, and Leonard Fournette runs it in. And now at this point, it's total pandemonium. It's total bedlam. The crowd is, there's just lunacy going on. People can't believe it. I'm getting flashbacks, and flooding to the top of my mind is that 2016 Super Bowl between Tom Brady and the Patriots versus the Atlanta Falcons, the 28-3 comeback. And I was starting to, at the forefront of my mind, think about how am I going to contextualize being on the wrong end of what I would argue to have been the worst collapse in NFL playoff history. I really thought that this 27-3, the fashion in which the Rams were just kind of upchucking this game and choking away this game, I thought was more egregious than what the Falcons did, because at least the Falcons, their play calls got conservative. The Rams shot themselves in the foot by their repeated turnovers time and time again. That was a big difference. And so you have all of this swirling around in the air, and yet when the rubber needed to meet the road, when it's 27-27, and only a couple people maybe thought in that Raymond Jones Stadium that the Rams were going to manage to regroup. The 2 guys that did were the 2 most important pieces of this Rams team, perhaps all year. Stafford and Kupp managed to regroup. And actually, Stafford got sacked. They had to use their final timeout, 34 seconds left. And that's when he's able to hit Cooper Kupp twice, once over the middle. Well, end up starting, the route started over the middle. He found him towards the sideline just by the seam. Great route running by Cooper Kupp. And then the pass, the 44-yard bomb to Kupp to set up the game-winning field goal for Matt Gay. And that's the throw right there. That's the moment right there where you say this is why the Rams traded for Matthew Stafford over Jared Goff. This is why they gave up a couple first-round picks. We saw the 49ers were caught on the wrong end of the stick in this example against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Jimmy G couldn't hit Emmanuel Sanders on a very similar ball. Stafford hit Kupp for 44 yards, and that was all she wrote. And they didn't just kind of soak in their own misery. They didn't sit in their own misery. They said, well, we still have 42 seconds left in the timeout to set up a game-winning field goal for a Pro Bowl kicker. That's what they did. And again, defensively, Aaron Donald backed up his comments, his pregame comments about Tom Brady. He was a menace had a sack, 2 forced fumbles, and that was battling through double and triple teams. He was constantly in the thick of it, constantly applying pressure. They were pressuring Brady all night long, or all, I guess, game long. And all the key acquisitions that the Rams had made, not only in this offseason, but for several off seasons, they all played and came to fruition in a great way yesterday. OBJ, again, had one of his most productive games as a Ram, especially in a big spot, 6 catches, 69 yards. Obviously, Stafford played a fantastic game. The bad snap wasn't his fault, and outside of that, he only threw one bad pass the entire game for the most part. Von Miller had a sack and had a and forced a fumble. He was great. So then you have Cooper Kupp, who is just extremely deft and just has this knack for getting wide open. He just has this uncanny ability to find creases, to find little just pockets of space to get open to, and Stafford's hit him. And again, how the Rams ended up winning this game to overcome all those miscues, that was miraculous to me in and of itself. But at the end of the day, this is why you play football games. This is what NFL football comes down to, is just finding a way to win. It's not going to be pretty. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes the outlook seems bleak and dire, yet as long as you find a way to get the job done, overcoming a new challenge, that's all that matters. It's all that matters. So, had a great time taking some Advil after that game. No question about it. Definitely needed it. And I wanted to transition to their next opponent, the San Francisco 49ers, another divisional opponent. And that NFC Championship game is going to be great. Again, a rematch of Week 18 between these two teams. But the San Francisco 49ers, such a fascinating story that they've had all year. Such a fascinating, gritty story. They're almost like the cockroach that just doesn't die. They just find new ways to win. And Saturday, they epitomized that. They upset the number 1 seed, not only in the NFC, but in the entire NFL playoffs. The Green Bay Packers on the road, 13-10 at Lambeau. So there are a few teams in the NFL that we've seen all season, and really over the course of the last couple seasons, that truly embody and embrace physicality. They embrace grit. They embrace the grind, the rugged mentality of an NFL football team. There are very few teams in the NFL that are truly gritty, that aren't flashy, don't really have many explosive plays, and yet just do a great job of mucking up the game. They just muddle up the game, and they force you to have to just wade through an entire football field. And that's the San Francisco 49ers. That's who they've been all year. That's who they've been the last several years. And for this team to have gone on the road to Lambeau Field, to play in the elements, to play in the conditions, not only the inclement weather, but you think about all the advantages that the Packers had, the fact that they were playing at home, coming off a bye, they were healthier. Some key defensive players for the 49ers were banged up. They had advantages pretty much across the board. And the fact that they managed to pull out this win in what seemed like an improbable victory for this team, the fact that 90% of the field for over half the game was covered in white snow, it was extremely impressive and extremely commendable. And again, I have to pay them their respects, because we've always said about the San Francisco 49ers that they've had the personnel to match a lot of the talent level on most teams. They really have. When you look at this roster from top to bottom, They've always had the personnel to compete. There hasn't always been a glaring disparity between the majority of the positions, the coaching. Normally, the one question mark was with Jimmy G, the quarterback position. Now, some people don't think he's a top 10 quarterback. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, but I've always said that I do believe he is a winning quarterback, and certainly the database backs that up at this point. But the problem was with the 49ers, they just didn't execute at the beginning of the year. Started off 3-5, but they finished the last 2 months going 7-2, heading into the postseason to pilfer a postseason berth, and they've maximized it. 2 road games, 2 road victories. And let's remember that it was only 2 years ago that this similar San Francisco 49ers team, a very similar iteration of this team, reached the Super Bowl. It wasn't that long ago. And now they're returning back to the NFC Championship game 2 years later. And to me, for the 49ers, and I'll touch on the Packers in a moment, they relied on a couple key areas and individuals. They relied on their special teams, which was the one key advantage they had coming into this matchup. They relied on their defense, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, and the secondary being able to hold up, and Deebo Samuel. And I was talking about lacking the superlatives to praise Mahomes and Allen. I think the same can be said for Deebo Samuel. I've said this. I've praised him profusely for weeks on end. I've always been bullish about this guy. He is not only the ultimate Swiss Army knife, but one of the most talented and skillful NFL players that we've seen. And the fact that he's able to thrive every single position, every spot on the football field is absolutely amazing. I mean, the guy is just getting mauled out there. Let's be honest. He's getting beat into hell, taking hit after hit after hit. He's being bruised and bludgeoned. Multiple defensive linemen falling on top of him. Kyle Shanahan initially played him at the running back position more out of desperation and necessity because they were depleted at the running back position, more so than, let's just put one of our best wide receivers in the backfield, get absolutely massacred back there. And instead, Shanahan saw the effectiveness several weeks ago and said, well, yeah, I can ride Elijah Mitchell, but why don't I continue to use these direct handoffs or these tosses or these little setup screens to Deebo Samuel and just let the guy go? I mean, the guy is the ultimate hybrid wide receiver running back workhorse, but it's more than that because the guy had 10 rushes for 39 yards, 3 receptions for, I think, for 44 yards. He also was on the kickoff return team, had 2 kickoff returns for over 50 yards. The guy was being utilized every single place on the field. And you combine that with the defense did a tremendous job sacking Aaron Rodgers 5 times, forcing 2 fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. Can't give enough credit to the San Francisco 49ers, but now I have to transition to the Packers. Now, let me first say that the game-winning field goal that they conceded, the fact that they were so clueless and unprepared to only have 10 guys trot out onto the field in that instance is beyond me. They're not on the road. You're at home. You practice those situations. And for them to not have seen that they were missing a guy on the field, a potential additional body to get a hand up on Robbie Gould, that's an indictment against the coaching staff. That's an indictment on just that whole team not being ready and not clearly counting how many guys are on the field in that critical spot of the game. That's first of all. But the problem was the Packers offensively were just stuck in the mud. They couldn't get the engine to start. It was too cold out there for them to start the engine. When you live in the Midwest, when you live in the East Coast, you know you have to turn on your car about 20 minutes before you actually intend to use it. When it's in the driveway, let it rev up, let it heat up, and then you can hop on in the car and it's able to drive away. the Packers, it's like it got jump started for the first series when they led 7-0, and then they couldn't ignite the engine anymore. And this is unfortunately a poor reflection on Aaron Rodgers in this instance. And I understand that not all of the shortcomings fall on Aaron Rodgers. Wasn't his fault that Mercedes Lewis fumbled the ball. Wasn't his fault for the multiple special teams gaffes, the blocked field goal, the punt that is blocked and returned for a touchdown. Those aren't his fault. That's true. I will concede that. But the bottom line is he had ample chances throughout the entire early evening and through the entire night to lead his team to scoring more points. And he just failed to deliver again in the postseason. And he is still fantastic, and I still believe in Aaron Rodgers. But right now, this is an indictment on who he's been the last couple of years in the postseason. The fact that he constantly settled for the little check down. I understand the inclement weather, the weather conditions played a factor, but the fact that he was a little bit unwilling to take some bigger chances, and again, just resorted to dropping it down to running backs or some of his wide receivers for 5-6 yard completions. He averaged 4.8 air yards per pass on average. So I understand that a lot of the focus is going to be on those special team gaffes, but again, you can't ask your defense, in my opinion, to play any better than the Packers defense played. They sacked Jimmy 4 times. They had an interception on 4th and 1 when the 49ers are knocking on the door of potentially tying this game up, down 10-3 with 6 minutes to go in the 4th. Packers defense stops them, shuts the door on them on 4th and 1, and you get the ball back, and immediately you 3 and out. Obviously, that's what led to the punt, but you go 3 and out right after that defense came up with a tremendous stop. And then even when it's tied 10-10, again you go 3 and out. So if the Packers want to blame, or Aaron Rodgers wants to blame anyone, you just have to look yourself in the mirror. And he just didn't deliver and execute when they needed it to. And the reality is, it was still tied 10-10. They had plenty of time to regroup. The Rams did it. The Packers did it. And when these two teams played in the regular season, it was just as hotly contested back then at Candlestick. But the difference was it was 28-27 49ers after Jimmy G led what at the time was thought to be perhaps a game-winning drive, and Aaron Rodgers led the Packers in 36 seconds into field goal range. So he's capable of doing that. There's no question about it. He's capable of doing it, but he just didn't do it. He didn't deliver. There was only one area in this game, again, that the 49ers had a decisive advantage over the Packers entering this game. That was special teams. Quarterback, obviously Rodgers is better than Jimmy G. Running back position, I like Elijah Mitchell. Sure, Deebo Samuel can line up in the backfield, but it's really a carousel at the running back position for Coach Shanahan. Packers, Aaron Jones, who's been a Pro Bowl running back, and A.J. Dillon, who's emerging as a really good power back in the NFL. Wide receivers, I love Deebo, and obviously George Kittle are great, but no one's going to make the claim they're better than Devontae Adams. Maybe coaching, I'd give a narrow edge to Kyle Shanahan, maybe more than a narrow edge now over Matt LaFleur. Defensively, both teams are great. Special teams was the one glaring disparity. That's about it. So there really aren't too many excuses at this point, and now Rodgers has lost all 4 meetings versus the 49ers in the postseason. And, he said that the 49ers would rue the day that they passed on him in the draft. That hasn't happened yet. We haven't seen that yet. And again, the 49ers are showing this unwillingness and unrelenting ability to persevere and win. And now they set themselves up with a great opportunity against a familiar foe in the Rams next week in the NFC Championship game. But credit to the 49ers for just coming to play and battling through those elements. I mean, again, about 90% was a snowstorm by the end of it. And it was just a fun game to watch. And Robbie Gould delivers again, perfect in his postseason career. Just exhibiting a great ability to win. Okay. Final topic before my Malkin's moments. Just want to touch on, again, the final divisional round game. This was a big NFL-heavy show today. Just felt right given the excitement and enthusiasm we all had for those NFL games. Just wanted to give every single team an opportunity because Cincinnati Bengals, this marvelous playoff run continues for them. They knock off the number one seed in the AFC, the Titans, 19-16. And let me first say, this is why last week when I came out with my top 8 rankings, between the remaining NFL playoff teams, I have the Tennessee Titans at number 6. It's not that I didn't believe in the Tennessee Titans as a whole, but I knew that I didn't necessarily predict that the Bengals would win, but I knew that when Derrick Henry would be coming back, he wouldn't be his full self yet, which is, you can't expect the guy who's missed over 2.5 months coming off a foot injury to all of a sudden return to the leading MVP candidate. So we knew he'd be limited as far as his production and that the game would be in the hands of Ryan Tannehill. And that was where my reservations lied. That's precisely why I had the Tennessee Titans at number 6. Ryan Tannehill is good. He is a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. And that's what this game came down to. That's the reality. Again, Derrick Henry is a monster, but you look at when he's been shut down, when he's been bottled up, and the onus has shifted on to Ryan Tannehill, could he produce? And we have seen that in the postseason the last now 3 years. That's the body of work. That's a sample size. In 2019, it was Henry that rushed for 182 yards against the Pats and 195 against the Ravens that propelled the Titans to the AFC Championship game. What happened against the Chiefs? That didn't happen. Derrick Henry was contained. The bulk of the load was shifted onto Ryan Tannehill, and he couldn't deliver. Last year against the Ravens, he threw a pick. Derrick Henry was bottled up. He couldn't lead the Titans to victory at home. And now this year, he had a couple good passes. He had one stellar pass. The touchdown pass to A.J. Brown was an absolute beauty. I'll give him credit for that one, but 3 interceptions. And perhaps the biggest interception of the season with 22 seconds left at midfield. So that's the problem, because you look at every other aspect of the Titans game and they were flawless. No turnovers as far as fumbles. No fumbles. The defense, I don't think, could have played better. You can't ask a defense to play any better than they did. They sacked Burrow 9 times. 9 times. They intercepted him once. That's all you can ask for from your defense. And yet you still find a way to come up short. That falls on Ryan Tannehill. And right now, that locker room feels probably a bit vexed right now. They're probably looking at themselves and looking at Ryan Tannehill in a different light than they probably did, if we're being fully honest, because at the quarterback position, Joe Burrow was going to have the advantage. That was the advantage for the Cincinnati Bengals. And speaking of Joe Burrow, sure, his performance wasn't necessarily stellar, but the guy's moxie, the guy's demeanor, the guy's leadership, it's just tremendous watching what this guy's doing. And I know that all the headlines, and deservedly so, are on Mahomes and Allen in the AFC, and Herbert's been getting his share of the limelight. But Joe Burrow's arriving too. With this guy, the the bounce back season that he's had from tearing his ACL last year to leading this team to the postseason to imbuing additional confidence in the team and imbuing and infusing this new swagger in this team that we hadn't seen from them in over 30 years. Again, the last time that the Cincinnati Bengals reached the AFC Championship game, I'm going to touch on it in my Malkin's moments, was 1988. And yet they're here. And Ja'Marr Chase is an emerging superstar at the wide receiver position. He's talking trash to the Titans DBs, and you know what? He should be, because they can't handle him. Most DBs in the NFL can't handle Ja'Marr Chase. And I just love that this team, they hate this narrative that they're the underdogs. And they actually balk at the fact that they're viewed as underdogs, and they don't want to use that as motivation, because at the end of the day, they see themselves in a much more optimistic light as the team to beat. You talk to all their defensive players, all the quotes in that locker room from the post game were insulted by the fact that we're viewed as underdogs. Those teams should be trying to and vying to beat us. And that's all a direct reflection of Joe Burrow. And I think it was perhaps the most personified in their rookie field goal kicker, Evan McPherson. There was a great quote by Joe Burrow where he said that prior to the game-winning field goal kick, after McPherson finished his warm-up swing, that he said, looks like we're going to the AFC Championship game right before the kick. If that's not Joe Burrow's attitude personified in a field goal kicker, then I don't know what is. Because I think we're looking at perhaps the next great up-and-coming field goal kicker in the NFL, another guy that's going to be around for years. And it's only fitting that he delivered a 52-yard game winner on the road. It was just a fantastic win. The defense, which typically isn't applauded always, came up huge. They were clutch. So, again, it's easy to gang up on Tannehill, and I already did. But it's easier to be complimentary of what the Bengals achieved. And that's what I prefer to do. Now, selfishly, I also think the Bengals versus the Chiefs is going to be a lot more entertaining than the Titans versus the Chiefs would have been. So I'm actually kind of happy that we get to see a rematch of Mahomes and Burrow, because that Week 17 game was electric between the two quarterbacks. So we get another treat in the AFC Championship game. But shout out to the Bengals for they almost like the Atlanta Hawks from last year, where we said who reached the Eastern Conference Finals, where we almost said like they were a year ahead of schedule from where we had anticipated they would be. Now, I'm not saying we're trying to claim that the Bengals will all of a sudden fall off the face of the NFL next year, nor am I necessarily guaranteeing that they're going to reach the AFC Championship game again, but that they are a precocious bunch, that they are a group that is overachieving beyond kind of their years. So big shout out to them. That was a fantastic performance by them. Okay, I'm running a little bit low on time, but I have some great Malkin's moments for you. A lot of Malkin's moments for you, a lot from this postseason, but even in college basketball, both on the women's and on the men's side. Want to stay tuned for that. So the first is, I touched on this, I highlighted this at the beginning of the broadcast. This is the first time in NFL history where in the divisional round, and really for any postseason round, 4 games featured a game-winning field goal or a walk-off score to win the game. We had never seen it before in the NFL playoffs. Obviously, the Bengals, I just touched on it, game-winning field goal to upset the Titans. Robbie Gould, game-winning field goal for the 49ers to upset the Packers. Matt Gay, game-winning field goal to knock off the defending champ Super Bowl Bucs. And then we had the overtime touchdown, Mahomes to Kelsey for the Chiefs to knock off the Bills. We had never seen that. For the Rams, not only did they walk it off 30-27, this was the 43rd game-winning drive in the fourth quarter or overtime of Matthew Stafford's career, which is the most of anyone since he's entered the NFL in 2009. I know he's been maligned. I know he's been cast aside for all those years of ineptitude or appeared ineptitude in Detroit. The fact that he only reached the postseason 3 times, was 0 for 3 in those postseason games. He had been ridiculed. He has stepped up. According to Elias Sports Bureau, the only other team, by the way, than the Rams to lose a 24-point lead in a playoff game and still win was the Chargers in 1981. The Rams looked like they were about to have the biggest collapse that I'd seen in the postseason. They managed to bounce back, and they became the first team to win a playoff game after losing 4 or more fumbles since the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers, who won the AFC Championship game against the Raiders despite 4 fumbles. We all remember that was the immaculate catch, I believe. The immaculate reception where Terry Bradshaw, it caroms off the back of a couple DBs of the Raiders, falls in the hands of Franco Harris, and he runs it into the end zone. That was an all-time great game in the NFL. And the Rams were the NFC seeds, number 4 seed. And they finished, obviously, with a 12-5 record. The only other team seeded 4th or lower to host a conference championship game since 1990 was the 2008 Arizona Cardinals, who were also the number 4 seed. Sticking with the Rams, Cooper Kupp, who set up the Rams game-winning field goal, he broke a Rams franchise record for the most receiving yards in a playoff game, 9 receptions, 183 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Obviously, he became the 4th wide receiver to win the Triple Crown this past season for the most receptions, most receiving yards, the most receiving touchdowns. His fantastic season is just continuing. And the 49ers upset, obviously, the Packers on the road 13-10. This was the first blocked punt return for a touchdown in 49ers playoff history. They had never collected one of those in the history, in the storied franchise of the San Francisco 49ers. The fact that this is a first for them is incredible. And the Niners became the first team since 1988. The Buffalo Bills did this in 1988 to block a punt and a field goal in the same playoff game. And San Francisco also became just the 4th team to win a postseason contest without an offensive touchdown since 2000. Remember, the 13 points were delivered off 2 field goals, two field goals, and a defensive touchdown, defensive special teams touchdown. Absolutely incredible. And so big shout out to them. Big shout out to the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, they collect their first AFC Championship game appearance since 1988, thanks to Evan McPherson. It's their first road playoff win in franchise history. Think about that. And Burrow was sacked 9 times, which tied the most in a playoff game in the Super Bowl era, and yet they still managed to overcome it and win. And their star wide receiver, Jamar Chase, continues to break records. He became the youngest NFL player, the youngest player in NFL history with multiple 100-yard receiving games. So the guy continues to shatter the record. And now transitioning to some other sports, talking about shattering records, LeBron James last week collected his 10,000th rebound of his NBA career, became the first player ever in the history of the game to record 30,000 points, 10,000 rebounds, and 9,000 assists. We haven't seen it. Came last week in the loss to the Indiana Pacers. He's having an historic season, let alone setting aside the fact that he's in year 19. In women's basketball, at the college level, Iowa Hawkeyes basketball player Caitlin Clark became the first Division I basketball player ever to post back-to-back 30-point triple-doubles. The Hawkeyes are 12-4 right now. They've won 5 straight games against Nebraska in a 93-83 win. She dropped 31 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. And then on the road at Minnesota, in which they beat the Gophers by 59 points, she drops 31 points, 13 rebounds, 11 assists. We've never seen at the Division I level. And speaking of things we've never seen at the Division I level in women's basketball, Kansas State's Ayoka Lee set the women's Division I record for the most points in a game. As Kansas City and the Wildcats, they knocked off the Oklahoma Sooners, who were ranked number 14, 94-65. She dropped 61 points. 61 points for Lee. It's spectacular. Final 2 quick ones. I know I'm going over. Steph Curry hit his first game winner at the buzzer in his career to knock off the Houston Rockets 105-103. He had a laugh about it after the game. He's had some game winners, but never legitimately at the buzzer. That was the first of his career. And then finally, the Bills obviously lost in heartbreaking fashion to the Chiefs in overtime last night, 42-36. But the Bills wide receiver Gabriel Davis set an NFL postseason record with 4 receiving touchdowns. All 4 of Allen's touchdowns went to Davis, who also had 201 receiving yards. He's the first player in NFL history to accomplish that. And when you think of the depth of the NFL, all the tremendous players that have come, the Jerry Rices, the Randy Moss, the Terrell Owens, just you can go down the list. And the fact that Gabriel Davis is the first guy to receive 4 NFL receiving touchdowns in a game, tremendous performance by him. All right, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter, Jonah Malkin, or at morning_Joe_. Instagram, JMalkin97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.